And we're going to go into our next hour, which is where we present the next four macroscopes that are part of the iteration. And this is our 19th iteration, and our other co-curators are on the call here with us, Lisel and Katy. Welcome back. And what I think I'm going to do here is I'm just going to tell you about the macroscopes as digital atlases, and then we're going to I'm going to present the visual introduction to machine learning, because we weren't able to have a representative from that macroscope join us today, but we do have representatives from the other three. So I'm just going to introduce that one, tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll move right into talking with Raúl Sánchez González and Anlia Plaza, Hanna Shumway, and André Skupin. So if that sounds like a good plan, we'll get into that. So the 19th is Macroscopes as digital atlases. And these digital atlases are collections of maps and charts that focus on a single theme. And the power of a digital atlas is that it makes comparison within a collection easier. By linking related visualizations and data sets, patterns and relationships emerge. This iteration includes digital atlases that address spatial equity, housing, coronavirus research, and machine learning techniques. Like the best cartographic and anatomical atlases, they are engaging, insightful, and easy to use. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen here really quickly. And this is a visual introduction to machine learning. It is by Stephanie Yi and Tony Chu. Stephanie is a researcher who's passionate about the power of data science and machine learning and enjoys making complex concepts accessible to others. She is currently VP of Product Data Science and Engineering at Netflix. In the past, she's been at Stitch Fix, Cardiogram, Sift Science, Google, Bain & Company, and Vector Capital. She holds an MS in Statistics from Stanford University and a BA in Economics from Columbia University. She lives in San Francisco with her husband and twin daughters, and includes as her hobbies cooking, traveling, and making ceramics. An economist at heart, she studied statistics because it helps the world make sense. I think we would all like the world to make a little bit more sense, so that's awesome. And then also Tony Chu, who has spent a decade thinking about the design of machine learning tools and systems. Currently, he is product designer at Tekton.ai, where he works on UX for data science and data engineers. Previously, he has worked at Facebook, AI Noodle Analytics, H2O, and Sift Science. He holds an MFA in Interaction Design from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where he tried to change Congress with the infographic, Let's Free Congress. He enjoys using data visualization to tell stories and creating generative art in digital and analog mediums. And so this is their macroscope for this iteration, visual introduction to machine learning. You've probably heard of the term machine learning, but maybe you're a little fuzzy on exactly how it works. Well, don't worry, because this is a friendly introduction to machine learning that will give you the basics and beyond. So it begins with a problem. How does a machine learn to tell one thing from another? From there, this storytelling tutorial takes us through the process in a way that is both informative and easy to follow. Machine learning algorithms are powerful tools in the field of artificial intelligence. This macroscope is a great first step in understanding how to put that power to use. And so I encourage you to check this out. As you can see, it sort of begins by talking about what is machine learning, why is it important, and then it starts and it goes right into a very tangible use case. So how can we create a machine learning model to distinguish homes in New York from homes in San Francisco? And it takes us step by step through how you would sort of teach a computer to recognize that difference, how you would narrow things down, add dimensions. And what's really powerful about the storytelling presentation here is there's something different. You could present this in a journal paper, and you could read about it and then turn to a static visualization, and sort of see how that works. But the power of storytelling is it actually sort of does it as you're learning, and you could go back if you say, wait a minute, I didn't get that point. You can go back, and as it's doing it, it's actually kind of populating these graphs with data points, and so this is a wonderful way to kind of feel like, as you're going through it, you're sort of gaining this knowledge. And by the end of it, I think the true sign of success is that it really makes you want to learn more and dig into this topic a bit more. But it gives you that sort of base knowledge so that you can kind of proceed and know a little bit better what you're talking about. So that's the machine learning. We're very happy to have them as part of this. So I would like to turn it over next to the creators of Spain Lives in Flats, Raúl Sánchez González, a Spanish journalist covering stories about inequality, taxation, migration, agriculture, the labor market, elections, and public health. He has coordinated the elDiario.es data team since 2018. He has participated in journalistic investigations such as the Castellana Papers, which unveiled the tricks wealthy Spaniards used to avoid taxes. In Enslaved Lands, about the dark side of plantation crops. Spain Lives in Flats, which is this one, and Giving Birth with a Scalpel, an investigation that revealed the C-section rates of each hospital in Spain. Since 2015, he has been trying to tell stories based on database analysis at elDiario.es. And he is, along with Analia Plaza, she is a Spanish journalist based in Madrid, Spain. She currently works as a reporter for El Periódico de España, covering topics such as mobility, urban planning, and housing. Prior to this, she worked as a reporter for elDiario.es and contributed to several other publications, including El Confidencial and El País. Plaza has also worked in the tech industry, serving as a product manager for Spain at Citymapper, a London-based transport app, where she helped develop new features and improve user experience. With her expertise in both journalism and technology, she is well positioned to cover the intersection of urban living and transportation. So we're really happy to have you here, and we'll turn it over to you, and you can help us learn a little bit more about your work.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to be here. I think that you can hear me perfectly. Okay, perfect. Yes. I will share my the slides of to present our project. I think that you can see them now.
Yes, we see the slides.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's an honor to be here. As Todd said, my name is Raúl Sánchez. I'm head of the data journalism team at elDiario.es. And I'm here with my colleague Analia Plaza, our brilliant reporter specialized in urbanism and mobility, who actually works at El Periódico de España. I'm head of a department, a team that a small team that works in collaboration with all the newsroom, and we do a lot of projects based on geographic information and mapping. So we are here to present one of our last projects, which is Spain Lives in Flats. And I will explain first how this project started. So it all started with an idea that came out when we traveled to other countries, to other cities, and we see the difference between the Spanish cities and cities from all over the world. So, for example, this is a main view of a street in Los Angeles. What do you see here? You see a lot of small houses separated by garden, asphalt, and a lot of cars. And you can see now a typical view of a regular street in a city of Spain. In this case, this one is Barcelona, which is the second largest city in the country. And what do you see this time? You see a lot of buildings, one next to each other, but very different, these buildings, because they are from 5 to 7, 8, even 9 or 10 floors, every building. I can show you examples of almost every city in Spain And there are some little difference, but you can see a pattern. These cities, as you can see in the picture, you can see a regular street in, for example, Valencia, Sevilla, Bilbao, Madrid, the capital of Spain, and you can see a pattern. So we look at the data to confirm the hypothesis that we had, that in Spain, we have built more vertically than almost every country in the world. So we found the data that I'm showing right now in the chart. This data shows the percentage of apartment dwellers or people who live in apartments or flats in every country, in most countries of the world. As you can see, there are a very different percentage from the country. You can see like Spain, which is at 65%, and for example, you can see other countries. As you can see in the chart, Spain is one of the countries with the highest percentage of apartment dwellers in the world, according to data from the OECD. The concentration of population in these tall buildings, it's even greater than in countries such as Switzerland, Germany, or Italy, and only in South Korea, more people live in collective dwellings than in Spain. Just to compare, in the USA, only 26% of the population live in apartments. So we started the project to explain how this was possible. First, we have to find the data. So where the data of this project comes from? In Spain, we have a cadastral organism that is in charge of the information of all buildings in Spain, of all the footprints buildings in Spain. In total, the Spanish cadastro stores the footprint and the information of more than 12 million buildings around the country in more than 7,000 municipalities. It's like similar to a county, but a lot of them are much more smaller. So we use our programming language to use all the data compilation or the data analysis or data cleaning of this project. And I can show you, for example, this is an example of the R code we use, for example, to download all this data, because we had to download the buildings of each municipality one by one. So when we download all these files, we found that we have a huge amount of information. The total size of the download files exceeded like 200 gigabytes. Sounds a lot, right? Yeah, because we have for each one of the municipalities 2 files. First, a file with the main information of the building, for example, the construction date, the type of building, the number of dwellings, and some other technical information. And we have a type 2 of files which stores the heights, the information of the heights of each building. I can show you an example of this. This is, for example, Edificio España, Spain building, as you can say. This is one of the most famous buildings in Madrid, the capital of Spain. As you can see, it's a complex building with really tall, with a lot of different high levels. So this is the satellite imagery of the area where this building is. I can show you now the basic footprint. I mean, the first file I told you before, with information that store where is the polygon of the building. And now I will show you the information of the heights. As you can see, all the different parts that you can see there is all the different heights that the Spanish cadastro stores from that building. I mean, every part of this, it's almost like 30 parts, is a part with a different height from the building. So imagine that this division of each building with every building of the more than 12 million buildings in Spain. So that's why there are so much information. So what we had to do? We had to process these 200 gigabytes of data, and we process and join it in our programming language, all download files, to have a single database of with the details of the buildings in Spain. For example, we verify, we clean the data of these 12 million buildings, for example, to find errors. I can show you some examples. For example, we found that there are some buildings stored in the cadastre that supposedly they have more than 90 floors, when the highest skyscraper built in Spain has between 50 and 60 floors. So during the processing of the data, we found this kind of errors in the files that we later we notified the cadastral institution, and they corrected. So we use all this information to help the public administration to fix the data they have. So we have all this information. We have all this data clean, but we have to reduce this size because we wanted a map, a project that is capable of loading in every web page in the world. So we have to process all this data to reduce the size of the file. So we converted these more than 7,000 UJSON files, one for each municipality, to MB tiles. And MB tiles, I don't know if you know what is an MB tiles, but it's a kind of SQLite database that stores all the geographic information in tilesets. Tilesets are vector data, but broken up in different square tiles with all the geographic information, but at different levels of zoom. Why is better? Because when a user loads an MB tiles map, it only loads like the part that is loaded and that level of zoom, and not all the map. So we use, for example, the TypeCanal library to convert all these UJSON files to an MB tile. We use different configuration to reduce the size. Why we use this? Because we wanted to have a compatibility with Mapbox. Mapbox is the tool we use to visualize the story. So with all these processes, we had, for the first time in Spain, a database with the heights of all buildings in the country. So when we had all this database, how we visualize it, how we make it visual. We thought that we could explain why Spanish cities are one of the densest in the world and one of the tallest in the world, with a simple color scale. So we map in 3D the buildings and highlight the heights of each building using this simple color scale that you are seeing now on the screen. We try different options. For example, we try with from red to blue or from orange to purple, but we finally chose this one, which is green to pink, because we want to use a color scale that doesn't have positive and negative values related, and this color scale worked perfectly. So, for example, green represents small houses, houses from 1 to 3 floors. We, for example, link this color to, for example, monopoly houses or also with countryside. And big buildings are represented with pink. So with this scale, we use Mapbox, which is a powerful tool to create maps. And this is, for example, as you can see, I don't know if you can read it, but this is on the screen. You can see I think it's 20 lines of code. So simple to paint. This is the simple code that we use to paint all the buildings in the country. So what is the result? What did we found? This is the result of that simple 20 lines of code. This is, for example, a map of the urban landscape of Barcelona, where you can see this famous grid urbanism, this grid urban landscape that is famous in Barcelona. You can see also Benidorm, which is it's called the New York of Europe, because it's like the city with the most skyscrapers in the continent. And you can see, for example, this is Cádiz, which is a famous city, and you can see with the map two different parts. For example, on the left you can see the old town, which is the part with less space, where all buildings are green. And you can see on the right the part of the city that is built in the last century. For example, you can see like the modern part of the city. So as you can see, each of these maps is in this like a little piece of art that tells a lot of story. So how did we put together this story to create a fun journey to all readers? How did we go from data to a story? So Analia Plaza will tell us more about this.
So yeah, thank you for having us here. It's such an honor. So yeah, so my colleague Raúl told you like how like we got the data, we processed the data, but we had all this data, but obviously you need to tell a story, right? So it reaches the reader and people comprehend something, because otherwise you just launch a map and you get no story and no conclusion and no anything. So first of all, what we thought with all this beautiful data, beautiful map that we had, is that it should feel like a movie, right? We would like the reader would scroll down, and like the scrolling down would feel like a camera moving around the Spain and around different cities. And then we would tell the story over that movie with text and with graphics and with images, right? So after that, we had that in mind, which was really useful way to start the story and to start thinking about the piece we wanted to do. We just thought of a classic journalism story, which is like how you do it when you want to tell a story, like a big story. You normally start with a small case, something that represents what you want to tell later. So we did that, like no complication, no over engineering. We would, Raúl, can you? We would just like pick an example, and then we would tell our thesis, which is what we told you, that Spain is like one of the countries with like tallest countries in the world. And then we would say to the reader, like, how did we get there? And then we would like in chronological order, we would like tell the story, like how urbanism was developed in Spain. So for this reason, Raúl, no sé si puedes.
Sí.
¿Me la mueves? Can you move the presentation?
What do you need?
Like continue the es que se ha quedado en la de it should feel like a movie.
Okay, sorry. Wait, just a minute.
Al anterior, the before. Yeah, so before esa, la de Galicia.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So so for this reason, so we needed to find an example, and we found this example, which is in it's a big tower, as you can see. So it's like perfect example of vertical urbanism, and it's in A Coruña, which is in Galicia, which is a region in the north of Spain. So this was interesting for us because something that we needed was that not focusing on Madrid and Barcelona, the big cities. We wanted from the beginning every reader from Spain to feel included and feel that this story was going to be for them as well. So this was interesting because we found this example also because our data showed that A Coruña, we had no idea, was the tallest city in Spain. This is completely, I don't think that people knew before. I mean, probably architects and urbanists, but it's not something that it's known, right? So we started with these, we make a zoom and then we zoom out and we say like, oh, like, look at this building, it's very tall, it's one of the examples. Then we go to the test with the thesis, like, okay, Spain is one of the countries with the highest rates of like tall buildings. And then we move the camera to Barcelona. And in Barcelona, what we wanted to explain with this image is how urbanism went from this city center that you see like crowded and in between walls, how we went from this to what you see outside that, which is the ensanche, like which translates to the widening. So basically, and this happens in like a lot of Spanish cities. I think if you look at European cities, they're kind of the same. So basically, like urbanists at the time, in the 19th century, there was a belief that the air was poisonous, and that the illnesses were in the air. And they represented this with this picture that we included to make things dynamic, visual. It was called like the miasma theory. So they believed like cities should be more open, streets should be wider, the cities should be cleaner in general. So basically, they put down the walls, because what you see in the center, it was like between walls, and they started the widenings, right? The Barcelona one is like super good example and classic example. It's a grid that is super recognizable. But what happened with these ideas, and in Barcelona you can see that pretty well with our map, is that because of the land speculation, and because there were like a lot of people and more space was needed, is that even between the blocks, like the super blocks were supposed to be open with gardens and trees and stuff, but there were promoters who actually built inside the super blocks, right? So that lead us to like Barcelona becoming one of the densest cities in Spain. We made this calculation and we made this graphic. Along the story, we included a lot of graphics. So it's not only text, it's like dynamic and you don't get boring. You don't get bored. So yeah, so here we can see that Barcelona is like one of the densest. And I think like those that are densest than Barcelona are actually in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. Like Barcelona is extremely dense because it's super small and a lot of people needed to live there. So another graphic that we included, and that also helped us to tell the story along with the map, was this one, which is pretty interesting. I mean, it's not as like fastuous as the map, but it's also very interesting. This is telling us the story that that like when did this happen? Like when did we became like super tall? So it was in the 60s and 70s, because there was this big rural exodus. So people came from the villages to the cities, and since there was no space, they just started building like super tall buildings, and they created the metropolitan areas. And this is also there was also the baby boom at that time. It was like a bit later than in the US. And it's also telling us that in the 80s and 90s, this kind of stopped, like we stopped this trend. And what we adopted, and you can see that on the map and on the story, is the urban sprawl, which is something that actually came from the US, right? And we urbanists had to follow these ideas. And also because of the like car expansion and the like car centrism, so they started the urban sprawl with small houses and also apartment buildings, but quite disconnected from the city, right? Also, it was like it was like luxurious at the time, right? To have like a house outside the city and to be outside and not being like in the dense area. So as I said before, like to tell this story over the map, we needed to find a lot of examples, and we didn't want to tell like the basic examples, like examples that are like super known for everyone, like the Barcelona grid or this Benidorm that Raúl said before, like which is the New York of Europe. So we try to find like interesting examples. So how did we do that? Like we just did like journalism basic work, like we just called some experts, we call like 5 urbanists. We were talking about like all this story that I'm telling you. We learned a lot about that, and just like talking to them, we found examples, and also it helped us develop the story properly and have a base to tell the readers, right? Because otherwise I think it's quite difficult to do it yourself and like be sure that you're telling the right story. So after that, after we had all that in mind, like first we had the data, we had the beautiful map, we have a story. So we just created a script, and it was a very, very basic script. It was like cards, and it was thought like the movie, as I said, like, okay, so in the first zoom, you're gonna zoom into here, and we're gonna put this text here and this image, and then we're gonna zoom out, and we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna explain this here. It was like very, very simple. Try to make tests as short as possible so people wouldn't be bored. But after that, after we had all this story, we still felt that we had like some more stuff to tell, because we had learned so much with all this work and like talking to the experts and stuff, that we needed a conclusion. So we just included a small paragraph with some contemporary trends and like some takeaways, some stuff that we had learned, and we just put there like 5 ideas for the cities of the future. Like, okay, this is what we've been doing in Spain for the past like 100 years, and this is what experts think we should be doing in the future, right? But after that, so after the reader comes, understands the story and understands everything, we still know for experience, also because in elDiario.es, like, yeah, we've done a lot of data stories, so we know that, yeah, one of the things that readers love the most is just playing with maps. It's just so much fun to get a map and put your address and see what's going on around your area. Like, for example, election maps are like super fun, and they always go super viral. And so we knew that with this story, like apart from telling a story, we should like get the readers, like let the readers play. And we just included at the end of our story a different URL with a map, and invite the reader, just go explore your city, have fun, and that's it. So then the work is like it's it has a double use, right? Like, you have fun, but you also learn the story. And that was it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have some time for discussion at the end. But thank you for presenting. We're going to move to Hanna Shumway. If you're there, Hanna is an early career technologist and social scientist with deep experience in spatial analysis and data management, and a desire for public service. She currently studies in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT, and is particularly interested in enhancing cities' non-car mobility systems for a more equitable and climate resilient future, as well as critically examining the use of data and technology in cities. So already we're seeing some synergies here. So Hanna, if you're ready to go, please take it away.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll share my screen here as well. There we go. And can everyone see my screen well?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. As Todd mentioned, my name is Hanna Shumway. I'm a research assistant with the Norman B. Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism at MIT, where we investigate how to forefront equity in urban resilience planning, among a bunch of other things. And I'm really excited to share with you today a little bit about the project that we've been collaborating with the New York City-based advocacy organization Transportation Alternatives on, that's spatial equity. I'll get right into it. So the Spatial Equity NYC is a tool that we initially launched about a year ago, and we have continued working on this, and I'll get at the end to a little bit of what's upcoming and what we're working on now. But it's a web-based equity mapping tool created through our partnership with Transportation Alternatives. And the idea is to reveal inequities in the provision and quality of public space in New York City. It's intended as a resource to help city councilors, community board leaders, public space advocates, and the land use existing open data, and to use the land use existing open data to argue and advocate for their needs. So it visualizes data on human mobility, urban health, and the environment, and then it's able to be correlated with demographic data to reveal inequities and how they're sort of spatially distributed across the city. It sort of stands out from many other similar tools in that all the data is aggregated at the administrative scale that policymakers might care about. We're looking at these community boards and these council districts. Right now, we're working on adding state assembly and state senate districts as well. And that's sort of intended to directly connect the data with activism and government accountability. All right, so the research question that we came into this with in our partnership with TA, this was always very practice-based, as well as sort of, even though it's coming out of the university, we were very connected to TA throughout. We meet with them continuously. And so we were thinking about how do we create an equity mapping tool that draws together multiple data metrics available through the NYC Open Data portal, and then visualizes them in an accessible and legible format for city councilors, for public space advocates, and the public. And we recognized sort of three main challenges, and I guess this gets to the question. I know you all were hoping that we'd talk about kind of how this came to be and how we got the idea, right? And so these three problems kind of help motivate why we were thinking about this tool. And the first one is, while data might be open, you might not be able to use it depending on whether you have the skills to access and interpret it, or even know that it exists, right? And that alone is a pretty big barrier. It's just even knowing about open data sites and what you can find there. The second one is to ask how we bring together multiple data indicators of equity. And then we also noticed that open data is often not aggregated at the scale of local political boundaries, such as city council districts. So this is an example of the New York City Open Data Portal. And for all the abundance of data that are on the New York City Open Data, there are three issues that Spatial Equity NYC aims to address that we saw on NYC Open Data. One is that there's a lot of data available. You can see even just, this is like, if you go to the data tab on the NYC Open Data, this is sort of what you'd see. But in order to investigate issues of equity in particular here, you have to know what you're looking for already. And it's hard to look at two issues here and compare them. And then, next slide. And then the maps or visualizations of the data on New York City Open Data site are meant to show you the data in raw form, kind of give you a sense of what's there, but it's not intended for any sort of analysis, drawing conclusions, or even sort of visual exploration of the data. It's a little bit, in the case of this green infrastructure layer that we're showing here, it's just a little jumbled to see all of the dots on top of each other. And I will note that spatial equity is defined differently across cities, across the world, and specific equity issues that organizations seek to investigate and advocate for can vary. And we performed a survey of these tools across major cities in the US and found a wide and diverse landscape of indicators used to define equity. Some even included up to 200 variables. So in order to help us focus our definition of equity and the indicators that we wanted to use for this particular project and this particular partnership with Transportation Alternatives, we worked closely with our partners to focus our definition on their interest in sort of the public sphere and public space in the city. And then we looked at numerous data sets which might highlight and evaluate these issues. And ultimately, at least for our first iteration, we chose 15 data sets, organized them into issue areas that are listed here: the health, environment, and mobility, with a few metrics to represent each category. And we also included US Census data about race and ethnicity, poverty, daily commute mode, and vehicle ownership to sort of supplement a better understanding of the context around these variables. So while equity mapping tools do exist, such as EJ Screen, seen here, developed by the Environmental Protection Agency, the tools are often not developed for local government officials in a way that allows them to evaluate how they're doing using local political boundaries, again, like council districts. We wanted a way for New York politicians to aggregate and view the data at the local level and to advocate for change, both for them and then either for neighborhood groups and constituents who also want to advocate with those council members. I think it's looking at both the council level as well as like the grassroots level. So serving both of those constituencies. And so in developing Spatial Equity NYC, we focused on addressing the challenges that we found in the Open Data NYC and existing equity mapping tools by following these principles. One is that data is converted into actionable information. It's visually uniform, publicly legible, and accessible. The data dashboard also collates multiple equity metrics in one place and allows for comparisons. That was really important to us, different comparisons across these metrics. And the scale of data reporting includes political boundaries to further make data actionable by policy and decision makers. So now we'll give you just a little bit of a peek at the site, and I won't go too far into this, but do want to at least show you kind of how it all looks. And I will start here, but users can choose to explore spatial equity through citywide data across all of New York City, or through searching for their specific council district or neighborhood, or their address under community profiles. In developing the tool, we had two kind of key user groups in mind. One is city councilors and community so there's city councilors who might want to look, citywide, see how their district compares to the whole rest of the city, as well as community activists who might want to dive directly into their districts and find out exactly what's going on with asthma in my district, what's going on with green space in my district, and advocate for many different things through that lens. And so in exploring citywide data, for example, users have core categories and data metrics to investigate. For example, under the health tab, adult asthma rates can be displayed across the 5 boroughs of the city, and users can toggle between this chart view and as well as a map view. In the chart view, this is an interactive histogram that allows users to view the rankings of city council districts in comparison with one another, and the solutions panel at the right. And this was really important to our partners. The solutions panel introduces a series of potential solutions to tackle the specific equity issue being explored. And in this case, that's around asthma. And I think it was the reason I say that the solutions tab is really important to our partners is because they're really looking for this to be a tool that connects directly with action. And that allows, as you're exploring the site, you're not just seeing, either, like, oh, wait, I have a lot of green space, great. Or like, oh no, my district doesn't have a lot of green space, or there's a ton of asthma. And it's just sort of, disempowering. Like they really wanted to offer like on-ramps to community engagement and advocacy through this, rather than just kind of showing what's wrong. In map view, users can explore the spatial distribution of data and highlight the districts with the highest asthma rates, as shown with a hatch. And you can see that kind of in the upper left or upper right of our screen here. The map also displays specific information on each council district or community board as the user hovers over the district. And then I also wanted to show that users can compare how the highest levels of asthma also happen to be in some of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City by adding the demographic map to the split screen. Under community profiles, then, users search for a specific city council district or community board, or can look up their address to discover which council district they're in. After locating their district, the map immediately highlights the top 3 equity issues for the district. And users can then dive deeper into a particular issue and see it mapped for their community in comparison to other city council districts. You can even zoom in a little bit further to see how the data ranges across neighborhoods at a more granular scale. So in this case, when you zoom in, you see the neighborhood level when you are looking at your city council to kind of be able to compare which parts of this city council district have different values for, in this case, surface temperature. Users can then switch to community profile report cards to get a detailed breakdown of how their community performs across all metrics. And here we see how Council District 37 is performing in their top 3 equity issues. So it looks like it is one of the districts with the fewest bus lanes. It also ranks as one of the hottest neighborhoods, and it has high levels of traffic fatalities. So clicking on any issue brings up a chart with more specific metrics to offer citable findings around, in this case, District 37 in comparison with other districts. And then I wanted to highlight a real-world example of how one staff member from the New York City Council used the tool so far. David Burrow, who's a staff member in the office of Christopher Martin, Manhattan, recently spoke to the use of Spatial Equity NYC as a way to quickly understand how his council district, Council District 1, performs across a range of categories. David started by looking into mobility metrics under citywide data, being attuned to the issues of downtown Manhattan. He knows that traffic volume is an ongoing challenge, but he wanted to get a concrete data-backed understanding of how traffic congestion varies across Council District 1 and the rest of downtown Manhattan. By selecting traffic volume, he used the histogram to show that at the borough level, and borough here is shown in the different colors, Manhattan suffers the most from traffic congestion. A small text description also describes how traffic volume is related to air pollution. And as well as bus speeds and surface temperature. He saw that City Council 1 ranks as one of the worst council districts in the city for traffic congestion. Switching to the map confirms that traffic volume within all of Manhattan is a challenge. So you can see by all of that dark blue. But zooming in further, David saw that while City Council District 1 is ranked as one of the better cases of traffic volume in Manhattan, Chinatown actually suffers from some of the highest cases of traffic congestion. And this gave David a clear picture of where investments and policy are needed. David also related traffic volume to race and ethnicity, shown in the dot map here. To giving him a sense which groups of people it would be valuable to include and consult with in the community and during community engagement processes. So David referred to the table to get a citation of the total amount of traffic congestion in his city council district, and he used the solutions panel to access some policy suggestions on ways to reduce traffic congestion and reference external links for some further research. Spatial Equity NYC overall helped David identify core issues that Council District 1 experiences, as well as how they're distributed through Tribeca and Chinatown. By taking screenshots of the site, David had a strong suite of visual aids to communicate the issue of traffic congestion to his team. And while the external links served as a springboard for him and the team to do further research. And overall, since Spatial Equity NYC launched, we have evidenced its adoption by city councilors and discussed its future capacity as a resource for policymaking advocacy. We met with several city councilors and staff in the offices of elected officials, and are going to continue to do that for the second phase of the project as well. And we discussed its future capacity and how it could be used to advocate for better public space. And these are just a couple of other sort of versions of like how this project has blown up. The spatial equity was released last October with a ton of great news coverage. And soon after, we were excited to learn of the various ways in which people were using the tool. And here we see examples of journalists who first accessed the tool and then used it to tell stories about equity in the city. And even we also saw our maps quite readily on Twitter. The share functionality included in the tool made it easy for people to provide commentary on equity issues. And as I mentioned, city councilors, and this is a city councilor, Sylvia Brooks Powers, who also has been using the tool, talking about her addiction to the tool, which was fun to see. And here at the end, we just have a couple of quotes from different public servants who have used and enjoyed the tool, which is really sort of gratifying to see. Jamon Williams, who's a former candidate for New York governor, said the spatial equity goes from past anecdotes to actual facts and information that our leaders can use to make better policy. Jennifer Gutierrez, who's the city councilor for District 34, said the tool allows us to highlight specific issues affecting our council district and our constituents. And then Lynn Shulman, who's the city councilor for District 29, says that she actively uses Spatial Equity NYC as the chair of the health committee and wants to share it with her fellow committee members. So moving forward, based on the feedback that we've gained, interfacing directly with all these city councilors, public space advocates, civic tech industry professionals, as well as city planners, we are actively further developing the Spatial Equity NYC with them. And we are adding new metrics, including some climate change data, looking at severe flooding throughout New York City, as well as some additional metrics around like zooming into different types of commute modes and looking at to see if we can highlight differences of experiences between bus and subway commuters in New York City. We're looking to track changes in the data over time as we move forward with this and correlate these changes with policy directives that may have been impacted them. Obviously, of course, we're always improving the site functionality and site features for continued ease of use of the tool. It's a really dense tool, and that's something we've struggled with. Certainly in the second phase is like making all of the data here as accessible as possible, and making sure that folks know where to click to get to what they want to get to, because that really is a priority for us. And we've worked really hard, and this is going to be implemented with our new release, which is coming up here in a couple of months, to automate the data updates so that the data changes in real time with the new data that's on the New York City open data site. And we also want to translate the site materials into different languages to enhance accessibility. And we're doing continued outreach to potential users to connect stakeholders with the evidence on the issues that matter most to them. So with that, I'll pause, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about this with you all today. This has been a huge team effort, and I'm excited that it was able to be featured in Macroscopes. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah, for walking us through this really important tool, and great having you. We're going to move to André Skupin. He's a professor of geography and co-director of the Center for Information Convergence and Strategy at San Diego State University, the inventor or co-inventor of several patented technologies and co-founder of Big Knowledge, which offers commercial knowledge management solutions, including the BOK-Map platform for knowledge discovery and analytics. He is a classically trained cartographer and a data visualization expert. with 30 years of experience in the global analytics market. His efforts have been supported by such diverse sources as the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and the Norway Research Council. And he is also an advisor on the Places and Spaces exhibit. So welcome, André, and I'll let you have the floor.
All right, thanks, Todd. Just a question for clarification. Do you want me to talk past 10 or stop at 10?
Please talk past 10.
Talk fast. Yes, yes.
We are
And
more flexible in the next. We
and
had
if other panelists or presenters need to pop off, that's fine.
Okay. So good morning, everyone from San Diego, where the sun is not yet up and my coffee's running low. And so 2 of the 4 entries in this year's edition are, as you saw just now, very geographic and very cartographic. And I am a geographer and, as you said, classically trained cartographer. And of course, therefore, I'm not making a geographic map. So this is about coronavirus, and it's a project that was actually executed very early on. And I will mention a little bit about why it's still relevant today. What we're really working on here is answering the typical big questions. In this case, it happens to be in the context of COVID that always occur, whether it's in public health knowledge management or virology or spatial equity, as we saw. If you're trying to get into the literature, if you're trying to form teams, interdisciplinary teams, there are always questions about who should be on these teams, what disciplines must be represented, where do we even start, what should we read? Basically, how do you read 1 million books? And the answer cannot be you open the first page of the first book and start reading. And so a good example of the power of mapping and contemporary geographic information systems was this dashboard from Johns Hopkins, which within its first year of operation had 2 billion, that's a B, 2 billion views. Basically the idea was, what if we can take that same technology we know that people can use these story maps and dashboard technologies and apply them to non-geographic information. And the context that eventually emerged was that by now we have about 370,000 items, papers that relate to COVID in some way. And depending on how you count them, it could be more than 1 million items that are currently indexed by data sets about scientific publishing related to COVID. So how are you supposed to make sense of that? Knowing that, in fact, that's quite representative of the real world, where 80 to 90% of data today are unstructured, and workers spend perhaps a quarter of their time not doing their work, but just looking for stuff that can inform their work. And you saw some nice examples of that, especially in the previous presentation with the spatial equity NYC, how it helps people getting their actual jobs done. And in terms of COVID and the medical domain, if you think about that, only 1/3 of nurses' time is patient time spent with patients, and 60% or so are used to create documentation and follow protocols. Not that those are not largely meant to support patient treatment and recovery, but there are other, including especially financial reasons for much of that time spent as well. And so our answer has been to leverage existing GIS platform technology, specifically ArcGIS Online, to create story maps and dashboards dealing with the knowledge domain of COVID. Now, this happened in about February 2020. And at the time, research started out, and these 1 million or so items created now, they didn't come out of nowhere. Instead, researchers were very much standing on the shoulders of giants. So it turns out, when we did it, we analyzed the COVID literature as it existed basically before the pandemic. What we're effectively doing is we're visualizing those giants on which research then stood to develop treatments, vaccines, prevention protocols, and so forth. Now, when you do this, you're forced to develop workflows that are quite unique because they leverage very different ways of doing things. So we're using the Web of Science as a data source. Then this wonderful Sci2 tool developed at Indiana University, Gephi for layout, and then we work our way towards GIS. First, desktop GIS, and ultimately the ArcGIS online platform with its various apps. And so here you can see early on already, so COVID research didn't start from zero. There were already 50 years worth of research, more than 15,000 papers. And arguably, these were much more focused on coronaviruses than most of the papers published since. That's because much of the literature among those between 300,000 and 1 million items actually are not about the biology or the medicine or the public health experts, but really about broader aspects of societal impact, like, for example, impact of COVID on economic development or on equity and so forth. And so this is our starting point, these 15,000 papers, and we're using Sci2 to boil that down to a backbone structure as a wonderful way of documenting that workflow inside of Sci2. And then we're moving into Gephi, probably the most popular network visualization tool or network layout tool, and does a really good job. And already in Sci2, we extracted clusters. And the nodes you see, these are subjects and concepts touched upon by these 15,000 papers. And we actually started with about 14,000 nodes, and that gets boiled down to this backbone structure with a handful, about half a dozen clusters in this network, between pharmacology on one hand, biotech on the other, public health on the other, forming these clusters. But then we're not done yet. We then move this into GIS, because GIS is informed by really centuries of cartographic expertise. And we're starting to create these more area structures that actually people have an easier time relating to than network layouts per se. And so we're basically expanding the network elements to form these area structures that allow us to show clusters within the network. And then we're using cartographic things like labeling, extensive labeling tools that are available that can create these labels automatically. And then ultimately move it into the ArcGIS online platform technology, where we are now building web layers, web maps, and they then are ingested in the actual apps as they're being constructed. So here's the ArcGIS story map telling the story of coronavirus. And here we have the finished story map. We'll look into that just now for a few seconds. And here are the dashboards. And this dashboard is 100% the same technology used by Johns Hopkins. So we're leveraging these existing dashboard technologies. Obviously, this is not a geographic map, but it is also very geographic in the principles of symbolization, how we use space, scale dependency, zooming in, zooming out, reveals more detail, and so forth. So let's switch to a quick overview. So there are two ways of getting into this. By far the most popular has been the story map. And that's related technology to what we saw from elDiario, where the story is being told through a mix of graphics, mapping, and text. And so there's some of the technical, the processing that I went through is explained, but then quickly it goes into first, sort of in a journalistic manner, first exposing some key elements and then diving further into them. So here it goes into the different sub areas, the clusters in this network. And again, as was said, before today, maps are really, people get maps, and people in this form are able to get, or at least accept as being useful, these kinds of non-geographic maps as well. And then we go into the individual regions. So we're exposing more about that with various outward links. And, people are always fascinated by where these infections come from. So the zoonosis, in this case, in the case of MERS, it was between bats and camels. That always makes for a good story. And then we get into detection and treatment. And what happened was, at this time, in early 2020, COVID-19 was already in the literature, but it wasn't yet tightly integrated because it was just emerging. But where it was partially integrated at this point was, if you zoom out, you'll recognize that this is the virology cluster that the COVID-19 as of early 2020 was integrated in, meaning at this point, it was still mostly about detection, tests, developing COVID tests. And then we are wrapping it up with a historic look at the very first coronavirus paper published in 1968. We also extracted other kinds of networks. So we extracted a network of the co-citations. A co-citation are two papers being cited by a third paper. And therefore, these two papers, these authors don't necessarily need to know anything about each other, but someone recognizes an inherent connection. And so one of the most common approaches in scientometrics is the analysis of these latent networks. And in this case, the most central paper at the beginning of the pandemic was this, really an overview paper of the biology of coronaviruses. And this product, this story map, together with the dashboard, has been used by by users in almost 80 countries. We have recorded users. The dashboard takes a different approach. It is more a mashup of bringing different APIs together, but where the map is the integrator, right? So here's a live Wikipedia pages are being retrieved, as well as scientific papers dealing with corona are being brought together. And here now, the map constructed from 15,000 papers at the beginning of the pandemic is used as the fulcrum, bringing together actually several 100,000 papers. So the papers being queried with this API, that's actually several 100,000 papers. And by the way, there are other ways of getting that in one place. It could be a network, it could be a landscape. And what's important is that we have platform technologies that allow us to fluidly integrate these different ways of looking at knowledge space. Thank you.
All right.
Andy, this is wonderful. Thank you so very, very much. There are some comments and questions in the chat, also to other panelists. And I think there are huge synergies in now taking geospatial maps, overlaying networks, but also rendering networks as geospatial maps. I think you're doing it all. And I would love to see a discussion around those topics.
Yeah, so I just texted out if people can stay, we can go till 10:30. And if I was wondering if any of the panelists have any questions for each other to start off with.
So I have a question to the spatial equity team. How easy or how hard would it be to take this to another city?
I think it would be really doable. Yeah, I think a lot of cities nowadays have these open data portals, right? With more or less, I mean, obviously New York City has a really robust one, which helped us out a lot with this particular project, but we see it more and more across the country now. I mean, I worked in Chicago this summer, and it would definitely be replicable in Chicago. I think that the more that, I mean, we live in such a data-rich age now that there's a lot out there, and that cities are often trying to do these open data things, but don't necessarily have the, you know, capacity to create a specific tool around something like spatial equity for a specific reason like this. So I think that absolutely this would be possible in other cities. It probably depends a little bit on what is already out there, but I know certainly in a lot of US cities it would be possible.
See, David has a question.
Yes, it's a question for André about how your system works. I understand that you use this core map to add all the documents and information on top of that. And do you update also your map according to the other documents? Do you add new terms or things like that? Or how do you manage the dynamics of the knowledge that is entering your system?
Are you talking about how I'm linking the existing network map to this broader literature now?
Yes, or do this networks map is updated according to your work on the broader literature?
I see. So it has not been. It could be done. It has not been. Because we focused more in the years since on developing basically the platform technologies to allow to create APIs so that others can ingest. For example, the fact that when I select, say, cell biology, it actually uses it creates a it inferences a multidimensional vector on the fly, driven by the concept in the map, but the map itself has not been updated, and of course it could and should be, yes, and that would not be so hard because these are discrete things, and it's really just a question: are there new nodes, and have the links changed? It would not be very hard, yes.
Thank you, André.
Analia?
Yes, hi. Yeah, this is a question for Hanna too. So like your tool was developed in academia, and you said that because officials don't have the time or resources to do it, but do you think that they should be doing it, or this is something that we should leave for academia? Because I can think of an example of Madrid, for example, that they use the data to actually tell a story that was not real, right? So not sure if you imagine other apart from academia, other people who should be doing it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think it's interesting because we came in with a really specific partner, right? Like we were working with Transportation Alternatives, and they have like their own advocacy agenda, right? It's like, so we're not coming in necessarily as even trying to be some sort of neutral party. I think we're definitely on the side of sort of like advocating for, you know, better equity across the city. Like we come in with an agenda. It's like it's a spatial equity tool, and we are advocating, you know, for equity. And I don't know if a government forwarded tool could be as explicit. Like, you know, we have like a solutions tab, right? And I don't know that like a government, if they were to create this tool like out of the public sector agency, that they would be as comfortable with offering like solutions or policy recommendations. So in that way, I think that it is useful that it's outside of the government, so that it can be used in that way. But I certainly think that public sector agencies could create something like this that could be useful. I mean, and you're right that it always sort of comes with an agenda. I mean, anytime we use maps and data visualizations, it comes with an agenda. And I think we're really acutely aware of that and trying to tell a story with spatial equity, not hiding from the fact, it's not just, neutral, unbiased data, right? Like we are telling a story with it. So yeah, we try to navigate that, but I think that's an interesting question about where this sort of visualization really should sit in our society. But yeah, thanks for the question.
Andy, how has your visualization been used by others? Can you tell us some of the usages? André, sorry.
Oh, well, so basically, the fact that users from almost 80 countries found it engaging shows that there is a gap, an existing gap that we're trying to address between what like Katy, David, and I have known for years, that there is power in uncovering the networks existing in the scientific domain, and yet it hasn't sort of gotten that pickup. It hasn't fired up the imagination of the public as much as, in fact, the other two projects that we just heard about. There's something more real about dealing with geographic space, because it's a place that we more obviously populate, that we live in, that we actually experience. And what I've been trying to do over the years is to make these non-geographic spaces as accessible. And what it takes for that is to, for example, the ability that we don't feature here, but that we feature on our commercial side, is to project yourself into that. Take your CV, for example, and link it to what other people's CVs, other people's activities, in ways that LinkedIn, for example, that's the business model, to make your life connected to other people's lives. And I think in network science, we still have some ways to go in making these fire the imagination of the public. And that's what I'm trying to do by linking it with traditional geographic mapping.
Very cool. Many of you have used storytelling and even scrolly maps to show your story. And yes, it's fun. Analia had a great overview of how she developed the story and optimized it and revised it and finally settled on one. And of course, these stories are very objective pathways. And ultimately, you can have many, many pathways through your data. Do you foresee a future where you would have multiple stories through your data? Because many of you have exactly one story. Maybe it's too much work, and there's a limit in budget and time.
So this is related to another answer to David's question that I just thought of, was that one of the reasons why updating the way we're doing it is relatively easy is because it's a platform technology with distinct modules that you can plug new data in and new processing. And in the case of story mapping, one thing is they're very easy to create. Like, at least in the case of ArcGIS story maps, students all over the place. In fact, at SDSU, at San Diego State University, for example, most story maps created are not done by geography students. They're done by students in African-American studies, history, economics. So they never took a class in the technology, really. It's really quite easy to do. And so you could have data sets sitting in a platform and then let people loose telling their stories.
Cool. I also wonder, in some of our projects, we actually have to create data sets, show how useful they are, and then empower our clients, those which want to use that high quality data, to create this kind of data on their end so that they can see themselves in a new way. And I think that's 3 steps through the sequence, right? So you don't have that data yet. So you have to create it, and you have to agree on de facto standards and how to even collect that in an easy way so that anyone can provide this kind of data. Then you have to find a way for them to submit this data in an official way with a license that you can use in these visualizations. And then you have to have data visualization tools that gracefully degrade, because maybe the data they provided wasn't yet as clean and as perfect as you would have wished for. But still, now they can have that new visualization of their activities or the new visualizations of their networks. I wonder if you have encountered this in your work, and if you could tell us more about it. Maybe I take this as a no, but I think this is happening more often
I don't
from
want
what I see, because some of the data sets you really wish for and they just don't exist yet. And you know, as a visualization researcher, as a data analyst and modeler, that, oh my God, if I would have that data, I could do magic.
So since the commercial company Esri that produces ArcGIS is not paying me, 30 years ago they did, but not anymore, I don't want to keep touting them. However, one of the advantages of using an all-encompassing platform-centered technology is that it has elements, for example, mobile data collection, where you can install an app on your phone and you stand on the street corner and you interview people about their lives, for example. And so students can do that now easily. My point is what these platform technologies do, they leverage the threshold of who can, under which circumstances, not just display data, tell stories, but also collect data.
Yeah, I mean, I'll concur on that. I would say that for our particular project, we're trying to really explicitly leverage the data that's already out there, and sort of in some cases, the transportation alternatives team has been using at least this first iteration of the tool to highlight, to talk with, different agencies, whether that's like the Department of Transportation, which collects the traffic fatalities data, for example, and say like, hey, this is what our data is telling us. And sometimes they'll be like, oh no, well, that is a little bit wrong in this way. And then it sort of pushes them to improve their data that they're putting out, and make it more accurate, or, more at least reflective of what's actually going on. So sometimes it's sort of a back and forth of sort of like the data is not yet in great shape, but it's out there. And so we're visualizing the data that exists, and then it's able to, provide some accountability and being like, well, this is the data you gave us, so what else are we supposed to advocate for and with? And it's sort of a back and forth in that way, which I think was sort of a little bit of an unintended aspect of this project, that it would actually be used to push the data providing agencies to improve their data. But that has definitely been an outcome in a number of these cases. We've also had some interesting conversations with the Department of Health around their asthma data and around some different things like that. And so, yeah, it's been interesting to see how we're not so much doing data collection, but sort of pushing on the data, being like, like, do you have this at a more granular level? Is there a way that we can create more nuance with the story that we're telling in the so if you as a public health expert see this asthma data and don't think it's reflective, like what can we do together to make this a more holistic story?
And I see David has a question.
Just to also react to your questions, I will present some things just after, but for our perspective, what we try is to also propose environment where you can import any kind of data, so facilitates, for example, API import, etc. And in the same environment, you can also collaboratively curate data before you visualize them. So it's a question of having the user in the loop that can all together visualize, curate data, come back to the original documents, annotate, and visualize again. So it is this kind of loops that we are trying to develop, and that is making super easy to import new data sets and build new data sets that are reliable.
Related to that, to both what David and Hanna said, is I can confirm that most of our projects, actually the purpose of the project as presented here, as included in the exhibit, is that it's something finished that serves a purpose now that it's done. But what you were both alluding to is that one of the main purposes of visualization and the powers of visualization is to uncover what doesn't yet exist or what is wrong with the data. The unknown unknowns. So I've found this especially in the healthcare domain, when there are curated patient databases. It went through all kinds of reviews, and then we get to work visualizing, and the first thing we find is something that is wrong with the data. And that, of course, is a purpose that's different from the purpose of this exhibit, perhaps, but Hanna points to where that can be a useful outcome, this feedback to the creators of the data.
So Todd, we have 3 more minutes. I think we did a beautiful debut. Thanks so much for moderating, hosting, bringing us all together. Lisel, thanks for being here also. And to all of our Macroscope makers, thank you for presenting in such a beautiful way your work, and also seeing these synergies across Macroscopes. That I think is really something that's near and dear to our all hearts here at Indiana University, to connect people, algorithms, connect different new methods so that they can be applied across disciplines, across the silos that we typically have in terms of academia, industry, government, so that we all can make better use of the data that exists, and also inspire some new data sets that we know could exist, but maybe that are not yet collected, but that could be collected to just inform better how we design our futures. We do have the 20th call for Macroscopes out. Maybe somebody can put that into the chat. We would love to see it widely advertised. I know you have different networks than we have. Please do feel free to share it with others, and also consider yourself to submit. I think this will be an exhibit iteration on the future of interactive data visualizations. And I think we will